Welcome to the Landis Look, where we take an inside look at the world of real estate. And believe it or not, we are halfway through 2019. So we're going to take a look at what the market's done in Metro Atlanta in the first half of the year. And it has been a crazy market. I mean, this is one of the craziest years that I can remember for a long time. I mean, since the market's been going up, since really the bottom in 2011, we've had pretty consistent years. I mean, some of those consistently really big jumps, but it's been up, up, up. And for the first time this year, you may be noticing, hey, there are signs in my neighborhood that have been up for a little while. Or maybe you're trying to sell a house and you're like, hey, it wasn't as easy as people talked about 2 or 3 years ago. And that is true, that the market this year, you'll hear people use the term, has softened, flattened, stabilized. But let's look at the actual numbers and see what's really going on. And I find these fascinating. I am a numbers guy and I love the numbers, but I think that you're going to see that there's some really interesting stuff going on right now. If you look at the overall numbers of the market, so at the end of last month, at the end of June, one of the things that I love to look at is, first of all, how much inventory is there? How many houses are on the market? Currently, there are 2.8 months of supply. That means that if no new houses came on the market at the current pace at which they're selling, the absorption rate, they'd all be gone in 2.8 months. That is still a seller's market. That's a pretty heavy seller's market. They say that 6 months of supply is a balanced market. We were in double-digit months in 2009 and 10 when we were at the peak of the buyer's market. So it's still a seller's market. 2.8 months of inventory is not that much. The average days on market of houses that sold in June, it's only 28. That means average, hey, in less than a month, the houses that were selling sold. And there also wasn't a ton of negotiation. The average sales price to list price was 97.5. That means on average, the sellers came 2.5% off of their purchase price or off of their list price. And at lower price points, that number was definitely less. So as you see that, and if you didn't know anything else, you don't know what has the market done, what direction is it going, you'd look at that and say, this is a strong market. This is a strong seller's market. It's a great time to sell a house. But if that's the case, why have we not seen that on the ground? Or maybe why have some of you not experienced that? Well, a couple things to remember, and the first one is a big one. These stats only include houses that sold. You can't have a days on market for a sold house if the house hasn't sold. And you can't have a sales price to list price unless you actually have a sales price. So let's take a look. What about the houses that are not on, the houses that have not sold that are still on the market? Let's dig into those because I think this is really interesting. Of the houses that are on the market and have not sold, almost 50% have received a price reduction. That means the price that they came out at, they didn't get an offer that was acceptable and had to reduce the price. That's a pretty significant number because that means that, in roughly half the cases, the sellers have shot too high and are asking for a price that the market didn't bear. Well, how long have those houses been on the market? This is the big thing right here. Houses that have had a price reduction, their median days on market, 111. And the higher the price point, the higher that number is. So he said 28 was for houses that sold, but those houses that are on the market and half of them that have had the price reduction, over 100 days, and that number's still going, right? Because these houses haven't sold. And this also does not include houses that have come off the market, where the seller put it on, they didn't find the right buyer and they decided, hey, now's not the right time for us, or maybe we'll rent it, or just take it off and try again later. Those houses are not even included in the active days on market. So what you're seeing is, hey, if the house is priced right, a lot of houses are still selling quickly, still selling with little negotiation. But if not, the house can sit on the market for a while. You can have those price reductions, you can have the higher days on market. And then what you end up with, for the houses that did get price reductions and did end up going under contract and selling, the sales price to list price, 93%. So 97.5 overall for houses that went under contract, but for houses where there was a price reduction, it was 93% of that original list price. So what does this mean practically? And then also, how does this compare to last year? I think those are a couple of things. And then I've got one other tidbit on the condo market, which I think is really interesting. Well, first of all, what this means for y'all out there, if you're thinking about selling a house, it's still a seller's market. If you didn't know what had happened the last couple years and someone just presented you with, hey, this is the market, this is a good time to sell a house. But it also does mean that we have to price the houses, and this is one thing that's really interesting. We have to price the houses in line with the sales, and sometimes, and I know this doesn't feel good, sometimes have to even price it underneath the last couple sales. Now, overall, prices in Metro Atlanta have risen year over year. The median sales price is up roughly 3% over January of last year. But that's median. That's not true everywhere. And in some cases, especially where the market had been really hot and people were overpaying, you might say, for houses last year or the year before, you might have to actually price your house a little bit below that to fall into that category where you're not doing the price reduction and where we're selling the house in 28 days on market on average. So, from the buyer standpoint though, this is the first time in a long time I have seen opportunity like this on the buyer side. When I say opportunity, I mean there's two things for the buyers if you're buying a personal house. One is you got to find a house that you love, and that doesn't always have to do with price. But secondly, there are people out there, like myself included, who want to get a deal. I want to get a deal when I buy something. I don't want to pay full price. It's why my wife and I have been minivan shopping now for like 3 months. I just can't get the right price on the van, and I don't want to overpay. If you're like that on houses and you want to get a good deal, well, think about those houses that have been on the market 111 days and have had a price reduction. No, not everyone is in a situation where they're willing to take a lower offer, but odds are some people are, right? I mean, think how fatiguing that would be to be on the market that long, to have not sold the house, and think about the life situations that people have. I mean, hey, I really need to get to a different city for a new job, or I need to get into a different house because my family has grown over the last year. That is an opportunity that has not existed in the past, and that's one of the things that I love about this market is it can work for buyers and sellers, and that is often not the case in the market. What about year over year? So how are we look? What's the trend going? Because I think that's always important to see as well. Well, the trends, the biggest difference year over year is that there are more houses on the market. So there are 9% more single family homes on the market this year than there were last year in June. So that's definitely more. All the other stats are pretty similar. So roughly the same number of houses are selling. It's within a couple percentage points. And the stats are roughly similar for the sellers. Those stats that I mentioned earlier, they are a little bit softening on the seller side, and that's why people will say it's a softening market. Days on market have gone up from 22 to 28. The sales price to list price, that was 97.5. Last year it was 98.1. So you can see those are going in a direction of a softening market, but it's not falling off a cliff by any means. The one other thing that I think is really, really interesting, and I'd love to know, because I don't know the answer to exactly why this is happening, I have an idea on it. The number of actives in the condo market. So I said single family houses, there were 9% more on the market. How many more condos do you think are on the market this year than were last year at this time? If you said 35%, you are right. That is a big number, right? It is sharply higher compared to last year. You have roughly the same amount selling. So you have almost the same amount selling within a couple of percentage points last year, but you have a lot more on the market. And is that because there's been tons of apartments delivered to the market? Has that been because there are some condos coming to the market, but not a ton, right? You don't look around like you did in Midtown in the early 2000s and see tower after tower going up with hundreds of units flooding the market. It's really interesting that there are a lot more condos on the market. So for anyone who's looking at a condo potentially, you have more selection than you've had in years. And you also have more people who are in that situation where they have their condos on the market and they haven't sold, and that can be a real opportunity for you as well. If you want to see these full stats, if you're a numbers person like me, we are happy to send them to you. Just put a message here on this video, send us a private message, or send me an email at Justin Landis Group. We got way more numbers than we could share with you today. They're broken down into price point, and so you can see that, because there's obviously a difference in a $200,000 house and a $2 million house. So send us a message. We're happy to dig into that. And also, if you're curious, how does this impact me personally? Is my neighborhood one of those where last year I would have sold it here and now I'm below, or the other way around? Send us a message. We're happy to dig into your personal situation and help you with that. So thanks for listening. We'll see you again next week.